Today we're going to set up a simple Express server, nothing fancy. It's going to be pretty much the same as what you would see in the documentation. First thing we need to do is actually create a folder for our Express server. So mkdir, the terminal line, we'll say Express server. Let's go ahead and change into that folder. And let's expand it. Now you can see there's nothing here. What we want to do is actually initialize the Express server application. So we're going to do an npm init, and let's go ahead and check out the settings. Package name, we'll leave it as is. Version, description, we'll just say Express server. Entry point, we'll leave it as index.js. Author, license. And then basically you just want to make sure that this looks okay. This is what's going to be inside your package.json file. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And now we see that our package.json file is created and our default settings are in place. Our next step is to actually install Express into our application. So we do npm install express -- save. And what this does is save it as a dependency in our package.json file. Now we can see that we have Express as a dependency, which means we can start working with it. Since we're using index.js as our main file, we need to go ahead and create that so we can start setting up our server. So make sure you're in the right folder, create your file, index.js. Now we can go ahead and get started with our Express server. The first thing we need to do is require Express and assign that to a variable. So we'll say const express equals require express. Then we want to execute the function stored in our Express variable and assign that to a separate variable. We'll call it app. And all we're going to do is say express. Now you can name this variable whatever you want. It could be app, it could be my server. It doesn't really matter. App is just essentially the convention that most people use. Next step is to actually set up a port variable to run our app on. So we'll say const port and we'll set it equal to 3000. This just means when our Express server runs and we go to localhost 3000, that's where things will be running. Our port setup, so let's go ahead and create our first route. And we're going to say app.get. So this basically means run our Express server, get the home route for us, and we need to set an arrow function with a request and a response. Let's open that up. Then what we want to do is send back a response once we hit that route at localhost 3000. So we say response, and then we're going to send back a response. And what we're going to do is just give us some text back. So we're going to say our Express server is up and running. Close this out. Now that we have our home route, we actually want to listen on the port that we created earlier. So we're going to say app.listen. We're going to put in our port variable, and then we need to open up an arrow function. What most people do here is they log out that the app is running, the server is running on our specific port. So we're going to do a console.log. We're going to open some template strings so we can actually dynamically add our port variable in. So we're going to say our server is up and running on port. Let's add our port variable. Let's close this off. This is now a fully functioning Express server. All we have to do is actually run the file, our index.js file. So let's go ahead and save the file. Let's go back to our terminal and say node, and we'll say index.js. Let's go and press enter. And we can see is our server is up and running on port 3000. Now the other thing we want to test is actually going to our home route in the browser. So I am going to open this up. And go to HTTP localhost 3000. And what we should see is our Express server is up and running. And there it is. That's the simplest version of an Express server that you're going to set up. Now, if you wanted to add additional routes, we could add a route here and say, app.get, maybe it's app.get test. Same thing, we need a request and a response. We open up an arrow function and we send something back. So we'll say running at /test. Close that off, save the file. We'll need to rerun this file since we updated it. Let's go to our browser. Let's increase that a little bit so you can see it. Let's go to /test. And now you can see that everything's running at our /test route. Now you probably noticed that having to stop the server and start it back up every time we save a file is pretty inefficient. So what we're going to do is make a little bit of an improvement by installing Nodemon. And that's a library from npm that actually restarts the server every time you save a file that's in your directory. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. So let's go to zoom this in. We'll look up Nodemon and it pops up at the top here. Let's scroll down a little bit. See if you can still see. Let's go zoom back in. Now I already have Nodemon installed globally, but I'm going to go ahead and just run the command. So from our terminal, let's stop the server. Let's paste this in, npm install -g Nodemon. Basically, the -g flag is a global install on your computer because you're going to be using it on various applications. Since we now have Nodemon, we actually want to install it into our dependencies within our package.json file. So we're going to say npm install, and we'll say save-dev Nodemon. Now what the dev flag does is install it to our dev dependencies instead of just our normal dependencies. That's because Nodemon is normally run locally on our computer for development purposes to speed things up. Every time we save a file, it's going to restart the server, and that allows us to see changes more rapidly. So most people install it as a dev dependency because it might not be something that goes into production. Now what we're going to see if we go to our package.json file is that Nodemon is showing up in our dev dependencies. Let's now start our Express server with Nodemon. So the way to do this is to say Nodemon, and we can pass our file in and say Nodemon index.js. So we do that, we see that it's up and running and watching, and it says our server is running on port 3000. So if we refresh this page, it's going to still work. If we go here, let's enter in, refresh the page, it's still working. Now if we stop this and refresh our page, the app's not going to run properly. Let's rerun our command to get Nodemon running and test out actually saving a file and making an update. So let's go ahead and let's refresh our page. So things are working properly, but we want to see if changing a file and saving it will restart our server. Now the page won't refresh because we have to manually refresh that, but the server will actually restart. So let's just change this home route and say updated, save the file. And what you've noticed is that at the bottom, it says restarting due to changes, and it's starting things back up. Now, if we refresh this page, it should show updated on our home route. That makes things so much easier working locally and seeing updates more immediately. The last thing we'll want to do is actually move this Nodemon command into a start script within our package.json file. So let's go ahead and move over to package.json, and we need to move up to our scripts. Let's go ahead and delete this out and add start-dev. And what we're going to pass into this is Nodemon index.js. Now that we have this script in place, we can run Nodemon using the script as opposed to running the Nodemon command every single time. So let's stop our server, refresh the page. We see it's not working. We just need to save our package.json file and run our npm command. So let's save the file. Let's do npm run start-dev. And you can see that it's running Nodemon index.js. It's working properly. The app's running, and we just want to test a file change and save to make sure that it reloads and shows on our page once we refresh the page. So we'll say updated to, save. You can see that it restarted. We refresh the page, updated to. And that's really it. We set up an Express server, we added some default routes, and then we added Nodemon to automatically restart the server every time we saved our file. Thanks for watching.